Yeah, I didn't think it was going to be that many.
That's going to bother me.
Welcome to the 278th Annual Town Meeting that has been conducted since the town was established in 1742. This meeting is now officially open. We'll start by having the Select Board Chair, Jim Majori, lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance.
Thank you, Jim. And now, Rick, would you like to say a few words about Lou Downey, who we've lost in this town?
Thank you, Madam Moderator. It's unusual to recognize individual members of the public, but there's one member of the public who just passed away, Lou Downey, who would be a fixture at every single deliberative session, school and town, sitting in the front row, and just passed away last week. So we thought it would be appropriate now to take a brief moment of silence just to recognize the passing of Lou and to remember her family in our hearts and wishes. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Okay, some introductions. Our supervisors of the checklist today are Jane Morse, Kevin Murphy, and Joanne Knox. If you haven't checked in yet, you need to go out to the front, check in, and grab one of these yellow cards. Town Clerk and Tax Collector is Sue Buchanan. Select Board is Jim Majori, Chair, Larry Miller, and James Sununu. Chair of the Budget Committee is Jonathan Panett. We also have members Frank Ferraro, Larry Miller, Rick Stanton, Tamara Lay, Margaret Delano, George Chauncey, and Nermina Peterson. Town Administrator is Mike Telly. Finance Director is Ryan Cornwell. We also have Chief Moan, Chief LaJoy, John Hubbard, Rick Milner, and Jan Fasella here today. I'm your moderator, Bobby Burns. Thank you to John Savastano, Luke Bednarek, Troy Kladeris for broadcasting today, plus Stu Spooner and Dimitri Mattis for all their help. I really don't know how all of our virtual options are going to go today, but I would like to say that Mike Tully has been relentless in his pursuit of providing means for as many voters as possible to take part today. So I would just like to say thank you to Mike Tully for that. Jonathan, would you like to open a Budget Committee meeting?
I'm officially opening up the Budget Committee meeting.
Okay. Town deliberative session is our opportunity to meet as a legislative body. This is a gathering of all registered voters who wish to participate. Only registered voters who are physically present today may amend articles and/or vote. The email, phone, and Zoom options are for information purposes only. Virtual attendees may ask questions and make comments, but not vote. Though the Select Board and Budget Committee are holding meetings simultaneously, the deliberative session is your meeting. As such, if you don't understand something or need clarification, just ask. At today's deliberative session, we will debate and amend articles. Actual voting on the warrant by casting official ballot will be on Tuesday, March 9th, here at the school from 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. Remember that COVID concerns continue to be a reason for voting absentee. We will have absentee ballots available at the town clerk's office as soon as possible. We will post on the website when they are available. Today we may amend or modify, but not change the subject matter of any article. Discussion will be limited to what can be done at this meeting. We will not vote to put an article on the warrant. All articles, either as is or amended, will be on the official ballot. Each article will be projected on screen. The article will be moved to the floor and seconded. I will then recognize someone to provide a brief explanation of the article. Then others will be allowed to speak or comment. Some basic rules. This is a meeting of registered voters. Others may attend, but non-voters will generally not be allowed to speak. Town staff, even if they aren't registered voters, will be permitted to speak for purposes of providing information and clarification. Please come up to the microphone to speak. If you can't come to the microphone, let me know and we will bring it to you. Please show your voter card, state your full name for the minutes. Please address all comments to me. You may also email jmajori@northampton-nh.gov, or call 964-5501, extension 100. These numbers will be projected across the bottom of your screen if you're watching from home on your TV. There is also Zoom access. Details can be found at the Northampton website, Town Clerk, or Assessors page. Remember, virtual attendees may comment or ask questions, but not vote, nor amend articles. Please state your name and street address before speaking. If you're on the Zoom call, either raise your hand in Zoom or raise your hand on the screen, and we will recognize you that way. Only one person has the floor at a time. Discussion between parties is not allowed. Once you have asked your question or made your comment, I ask that you yield to the next person speaking. If you are proposing an amendment, I may ask for it in writing to ensure that we record it properly. We will discuss only one amendment at a time. This is simply to ensure we keep everything straight. All those wishing to speak will be allowed to speak before any speaker has a second chance. This will include the various virtual options. However, if your email is a repeat of another comment or question, we may skip it. Remember, any article or amendment to an article can be reconsidered at any time, unless a vote is taken to restrict reconsideration. Once reconsideration is restricted, the article cannot be reopened. Positions that we have open are one Select Board position, a 3-year term. Jonathan Panett and Bill Kibbe are running. Bill and Jonathan, can you just raise your hands for the audience at home so they know who you are? One Town Treasurer, 1-year term. Angela Blattis. One Library Trustee, 3-year term. Susan Leonardi. 2 Budget Committee positions, 3-year term. Andrew Rauchi, Rick Stanton, and Sean Dion. If you 3 are here, can you raise your hand so the audience can see? One Trustee of the Cemeteries, 3-year term. Margaret Brown. 2 Planning Board members, 3-year term. Valerie Gamache and Phil Wilson. 2 Water Commission members, 3-year term. Henry Fuller, Tim Harnett, and Kathy Kilgore. If you 3 are here, can you raise your hand? Kathy. One Zoning Board member, 3-year term. No one is running for this position. One Trustee of the Trust Funds, 3-year term. Mary Lambert. I know there will be a candidates night, but I don't think that has been set yet. It's going to be Thursday, March 4th at the Town Hall? Okay, time? 7 p.m. Okay. It will also be on Channel 22 if anyone didn't hear that. Since the zoning articles cannot be amended, we are going to move them to the end of this meeting, just in case anyone is attending here in person today in order to vote but doesn't want to stay for the rest of the articles. Okay, so that means we were going to start with Article 5, the FY 2022 operating budget. Can I have a motion to move this article to the floor?
Madam Moderator, I move the article as presented.
Second?
Second.
Okay, I'm going to turn this over to Mike to give us a discussion of what this article entails.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. The Select Board and Budget Committee spent the last few months developing this budget, both the budget and as well as the default budget. And the 2021 operating budget, what we have today, is $7,426,422. The new 2022 operating budget is $7,682,313, a difference of $255,891, and that's 3.44%. Default budget is $7,774,158, a difference of $347,736 from today's budget, and that's an increase of 4.682%. So then we start talking about how did we get to those differences and what made up those differences in the fiscal 22 budget compared to fiscal 21. We saved about a little over $5,000 in the executive line. Town clerk elections line went up about $4,700. Financial administration is up about $7,300. Data processing is up about $4,000. Property valuation is down $1,700. Personnel administration, which is health insurance, which is mainly hit by a change in demographics, is up $24,628. That's a common theme with this year's budget, is health insurance increases. Planning and zoning up $6,200. General government buildings, we saved $2,400 there. Cemeteries up $238. Insurance down $9,325, and that was a savings we got through workers' comp and long-term disability, short-term disability. Associations and advertising saved $186. The police department up $99,224. What we saw there is a little bit of an increase in overtime, but mainly retirement contributions going up for Group 1 and Group 2 employees, as well as health insurance within the department, and they had a couple demographic shifts which caused rising health insurance fees. Fire and Rescue Department up $34,298. A lot of that is attributed to retirement and health insurance. Code enforcement down $20,658. Emergency management up $583. Highways and streets up $5,700. Street lighting, we saved $5,000 there. Director Hubbard has been spending a lot of time, had all the street lights changed over to LED, and we're starting to see the savings from those, so we're able to save some money there. Brush disposal up $232. Solid waste up $9,000. That's mostly for our tipping fee increases. Recycling up $1,422. Mosquito control, which is what we treat the whole town during the spring and during the summer, is $1,350 savings. Parks and Recreation up a little over $1,000. Northampton Public Library down $24,215. Patriotic purposes, we could save $1,000 there. Economic Development Committee, just under $1,000 there. And then we went up $66,000 for debt service principal and $63,000 for debt service interest. And that's how we make up that $255,891, which is the difference between last year's budget and this year's budget. Next slide is just kind of a picture of how we spend our money here in Northampton, and I don't think it surprises anybody that the lion's share of our spending goes for public safety, and the biggest share of that is personnel, and both fire, police. And then next to that, we have public works, general governments, and health insurance that are close to the same area. Then health and welfare, culture and recreation, conservation, and debt service that are in there also. But that's just kind of a picture for the public on where our money goes and what you spend it on. Thank you, Madam Moderator.
Thank you, Mike. Okay, I'd like to open it up to the floor then for questions or comments. If you have a question or comment, you can come up to the microphone.
Good morning, Madam Moderator. Can everyone hear me?
Nope, you need to speak closer in.
Okay. Eat the mic. All right, with the mask, it's interesting. Good morning, Madam Moderator. I do have a comment on the budget in regards to the library.
Jackie, you just have to state your name.
My name is Jacqueline Brandt, 182 Post Road. I've also been a library trustee for approximately 4 years. I'd like to thank everyone here for your service to the community. It's very much appreciated, and it makes Northampton really the community it is. So, here we are. What a difference a year makes. At the last deliberative session, this community came together and forged a compromise plan to build a new library on the Homestead lot. The citizens of Northampton then overwhelmingly gave their support to this plan and their trust to the library trustees to make this plan a reality with their vote. What we see today on that Homestead lot is a manifestation of an almost 30-year dream, and for that, we are truly grateful. To date, it can be seen from the exterior framing that the construction of the building is sealed, and the exterior is almost 100% complete. What you may not see as construction has moved inside is that the interior framing is 95% complete. The plumbing, electrical, and mechanical systems are ongoing and are on schedule. With continued luck with the weather and COVID concerns abated, the new library is on schedule to open its doors to our patrons sometime the first week in July of this year. The new library, which is more than twice the size of the existing library, offers a number of new features. A larger children's room, a teen and senior area, a business center, more computers for public use, and multiple meeting rooms, which offer flexibility for after-hours usage to the community, all in a modern, state-of-the-art, net zero-ready structure. The budget being considered today for fiscal 2020 will be the first operational budget for this new library. Again, more than twice the size of the existing library. For reference, the current budget of the library is $429,000. I'm using rounded numbers. The library was asked by the Select Board to reduce its costs and reduced the budget to $428,000 for fiscal year 2022. Now, this was already an extremely lean budget, and it was based on the reduction of taking one full-time staff member and replacing him with 2 part-time members, saving overhead. We complied and reduced that budget by $8,000 and submitted our new budget of $420,000, again, round numbers. Then the Select Board and Budget Committee further reduced that budget down to $405,000. This budget reduction included the cost for electricity and cooling of the new building to $15,000. The custodial costs for the new building were further reduced by 25%, even though we had actual bids from vendors showing that that cost was more. Further, cuts were made to the computer services and supplies account for an additional budget reduction of 14%. For a building twice the size of the current building. The bottom line is that the new library is being asked to operate within a budget constraint $24,000 less than the current budget for a building twice its size. Even given the new energy consumption estimate of $15,000 for heating, cooling, and electrical usage derived by our energy model, this falls short of what it's going to take to provide the necessary services for this community. Should the budget allowances not be restored, the library will be forced to curtail its hours and services to the community. It would be a shame that our citizens who voted so positively last year in support of this library not be able to use this library because we can't keep it open. It is with all sincerity and respect that I move to amend line 014550109110 to add $12,000 for a total of $417,000. Thank you.
Okay, is there a second on that motion? Okay, Kathy Kilgore seconds the motion. So we have comments on this amendment that's on the table.
Madam Moderator, I would like to make a motion to make this a secret ballot.
Okay, and you have five individuals that are requesting a secret ballot on this amendment? Can the 5 people just stand up so we know you're here? Okay, we have 5. Okay, any other comments on this amendment before we vote on it? You can come up to the microphone.
Thomas Lambert, Exeter Road. Could the Budget Committee explain their thoughts behind the reduction in the line?
Sure. Would someone from the Budget Committee like to speak to that? No one from the Budget Committee wants to speak to that.
The Budget Committee member that made the proposal to cut the budget down to $405,000 isn't here.
I mean, I will make a comment regarding the Budget Committee reducing the line item of 01455010910 was actually $2,014. And I think part of the discrepancy with it going back and forth over the last couple of weeks was what number was the Budget Committee actually going off of. The original proposed number from the library to the Select Board, or from the Select Board to the Budget Committee. So when we received these numbers, we received the numbers from Mr. Ryan Cornwell, And off of those numbers, like I said, we reduced that line item by $2,014. During that time, the Budget Committee, all members had the option to actually add funds back in based on the original proposal from the library, or like I said, reduce those numbers. So I'm not sure if that answers the question entirely, but I know that the $2,014 was done based on, I believe it was the cleaning or the maintenance of the actual building was a line item for $2,014.
Okay, any other comments or questions?
Madam Moderator,
Go ahead, Larry.
As a member of the Budget Committee, I can tell you why I voted to affirm the cuts proposed by Mr. Good. If you look in your package, you will see that the increase to the budget is $255,000 from last year. More than half of that is coming from the already expenses to build the library. And since the Select Board wished to come in with the leanest budget it could, we can't resist paying the capital or the bond cost or the interest. But we had to make cuts, so we decided not to cut public services, that is fire and police, because we believe at this time they're absolutely essential. It is my belief that if the library can live with a smaller budget, which I believe they could, if I were there, I could run the library with a lot less money. And if we have to do that for a year during a tremendous social upheaval, I thought if we spend $4 million on a library, that's probably enough for a while. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions?
Madam Moderator, you do have a Zoom participant that would like to speak.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Dana Hooper from 2 Rock Ribbon Road. I think the new library is an incredible feat of Northampton unity and community. I would ask the people on the floor to please restore the library operating budget to what the trustees recommended. I believe it was a lean and responsible budget to begin with and should be restored so that the new library, which was overwhelmingly supported by the people of Northampton, can open in early July and beyond, fully staffed and fully operational. So once again, I would ask the people on the floor to please vote to restore the library operating budget. Thank you.
Mike, do we have any other Zoom questions while we're here?
Not that I see, Madam Moderator.
Jim, you don't have anything? Any other questions from the floor? You come up to the microphone.
Emily Creighton, 32 Post Road. I want to echo what Jackie said earlier this morning. The library has always put together a lean budget, and the RSAs are clear in terms of the responsibility that the trustees has for their budget. Since 2004, I do not ever recall the Select Board altering the budget for the library. And the reason for that is because the RSA says that if there is a legitimate budget committee, that the trustees will submit their budget to the budget committee. This year it was different for whatever reason, but again, we did not willy-nilly go through the budget. The budget was revised about 3 times before the trustees approved it to be moved on. The Select Board took our budget and, as opposed to just passing it on to the budget committee, decided to make cuts. Now, I might think I can run the library just as well as Larry can or anybody else, but the reality here is that the trustees are responsible for being managers and taking a look at what we can do without or how we can reduce certain areas. That was done. We know that the Budget Committee has the right to make cuts. We don't disagree with that. But the Select Board needs to understand that is not their responsibility to make cuts. Again, you voted for trustees to manage the library. We need to let them do that. We are all here to present, I think, the perception as well as the goodwill to give a lean budget to the voters. The library has done their part. We're asking that you do yours and you vote to put that money back so that the library doesn't have to struggle to be able to pay their bills and keep the doors open. Thank you.
Okay, any other more comments before we go to a secret ballot vote?
Madam Moderator?
Yep.
I have one comment.
Go ahead, Jay.
Just to clarify, Mr. Miller mentioned the Select Board's process. I just wanted to clarify that every department, police, fire, highways, administration, all of those budgets were cut by the Select Board in our process. They are all below default. They are all below what those departments requested. So this was not something that was arbitrary. It was something that affected every town department.
Go ahead.
Again, Emily Creighton, 32 Post Road.
Emily, can I just ask if, because we do want to let everyone speak before anyone speaks a second time. Is there anyone who hasn't spoken yet that would like to speak before Emily goes on?
Yes, Madam Moderator.
Go ahead, Frank.
Thank you, Frank Ferraro, Post Road, member of the Budget Committee. I respect Mr. Miller's assertion that he could run it for cheaper, but the members of the trustees have years of experience. They also relied on the town librarian, who has many years of experience running a library. They did offer up a budget for, as Mrs. Brandt said, a library that's going to be twice the size of the current library. They did offer up a budget that was almost $10,000 less than the current year's library. In addition, again, I respect the Select Board's job to try to reduce cost, but the budget cut to the library's requested budget, which was also already lower than this current year, was one of the deepest cuts in any of the departments. And I guess I would just say, having looked at the details of what the library trustees submitted and what the selectmen proposed, it's kind of curious what the selectmen cut and what they added. So I just say again, what's being offered up here is significantly less than what's being used for the current library, which is, again, less than half as much as the new one. And if this budget goes through and the library trustees have to curtail hours because they can't heat the building as much as they would like to, or they won't have the staff to staff it as much as they'll need to, it isn't going to be the Budget Committee or the Select Board that gets blamed for it. It'll be the library trustees and the librarian. So I want you all to remember that, and when the complaints start coming in about reduced hours and reduced programs, I want the Select Board to step up and say, we did it. And I want the people that vote against this amendment to step up and said, we did it. So just take the consequences of your actions if you reduce this library budget down to an unreasonable number.
Emily, go ahead.
Madam Moderator?
Oh. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, sorry. No, it's okay.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Just for clarity, if it helps, I wanted to say that when the Select Board received the budget, we looked, I'm going to speak specifically to one line, and that was custodial. And I asked specifically how often the library was going to be cleaned, and that budget was for cleaning every day. So I asked how often are the town offices cleaned? And the town offices and town departments are cleaned twice a week. So I thought it made sense that if we are going to treat like things alike, that the library be cleaned as often as the town buildings are cleaned, which are used every day also. So I made the rationale not, it wasn't just an arbitrary cut. I don't want the town to think that, but made a rational decision that let's clean the library in the same way that we're cleaning the town, and made the adjustment to that line as such. So thank you.
Emily?
With all due respect, the library, in terms of cleaning, it's 3 times a week, not every day. Also, it's difficult to make that comparison for COVID reasons with the town as opposed to the library. The library has people coming in from all over our town, and they are physically touching things, as opposed to when you go into a town office, you stand by a counter and you really don't touch things or go in, and in most cases probably not in the bathroom. So I would not, as a manager, make that kind of decision, because those 2 places are totally different. I also feel that it's important that we as a town understand the idea of authority and responsibility and accountability when it comes to the different entities in our town. The library is not a department of the town. It is not a department, it is a full entity, the same as the school. And the select board does not go through the budget of the school and make corrections, deletions, whatever. The budget committee does. So it should be the same, because the library, by law, is a separate entity. It is on the same level with the town select board in terms of the authority, the accountability for the library. So I guess my thought here is that we need to maybe rethink our perceptions of the library and whether or not the select board has the ability to be able to step in and manage for the trustees. That's a no-no. So again, we're not asking for the full amount to be returned. We're asking for you to consider that the trustees have really gone through their budget and they're looking at what they really need to operate, no excess. So I'm asking you again to please put that money back in the budget for the library. Thank you.
Okay, does anyone have any new comments?
Madam Moderator, we also have one person on Zoom that's waiting too.
Okay, well,
Yep.
all right, the Zoom person can go.
Susan Grant.
Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify the cleaning situation. We are currently being cleaned twice a week in this building. We requested bids for 3 times a week cleaning. And what we have in our budget is the lower of 2 bids. We tried to get more bids, but there were no responses. For comparison, Lane Memorial Library in Hampton is cleaned every day for $26,000 a year approximately. So we feel that $19,000 for cleaning a brand new building and keeping it in good shape is reasonable. I just wanted to clarify that.
Okay, Jeff?
Good morning. My name is Jeff Hillier. I live at 3 Glendale Road, and I want to thank everybody who made this meeting possible, given the circumstances. My wife was a library trustee in the early 2000s, and the need for a new library was very apparent then. So obviously, a lot of us are delighted that finally it came. Through the back door a bit, different ways than expected. But in terms of comparisons to other things, we know the library was kind of the first step in the cog, since voters did not approve the whole campus concept for several years. The library had to go first to make room for town offices to move, to do this and do that. I guess I would ask, in terms of major town departments, if we get to the point, hopefully soon, of redoing or building a new fire department, fire station, I think inherent with that, and the department's doing incredible work given the circumstances they have to face. But if it came to that, can you imagine anybody rising to support a cut in the fire department budget because they have a new building, it's expensive, and it has a bond issue going with it? No one would do that. Yet here we are in certainly a less visible, less immediate type of service, but also very important to the residents. And we're saying, we're nickel and diming. We have a long history of not taking care of our buildings. And we've heard that from many quarters for 30 years. It's gotten better recently. But for goodness sakes, we've got a new building. We're delighted to have it. I know some people are not happy with the way it happened, but the voters voted. They knew they were committing, we knew we were committing to the expenses of a long-term bond issue and all the things that go with that. So I'm asking that we do the right thing with the wonderful library that we're going to have. Thank you.
Anyone else before we vote?
Yeah, Paul Marquis, 24 Hops Road. I'm going to disagree with Mr. Ferraro slightly. This budget is no longer belong to the library trustees. It belongs to you. This is your budget. You abdicated and took the responsibility away from the library trustees to execute their budget. In my previous life, I was responsible for $1 million to $1.5 million budget, excluding payroll. It was at the shipyard, and more often than not, year after year, I was asked to cut my budget 10%. The whole shipyard was doing that because we were under closure order, or someone was trying to close us. So we were pretty adamant about the business side of the business. I'd have to go in front of my boss and present my budget, but my boss wasn't a foolish person, nor did he think that he hired a foolish person. So if I went in front of my boss with the predicament that the library has now, with twice the space that they had before, and I cut my budget, my boss would look at me and say, "Are you crazy?" But he would let me do it if I wanted to do it, and then he'd hold me accountable for my budget. What happens here? You decide for a building that's twice the size that you're going to cut the budget. Mr. Ferraro, it's not the library trustees' budget anymore. They don't have the will and belief in it. You own the budget. Thank you.
Okay, any other comments?
Move the vote.
Okay, I think we're ready to go to vote. We're going to have to make sure we space out as we go outside to get your ballots. We will set the boxes up in here on that last table over there. You will vote by, there'll be a yes or a no. You can either circle the yes or no, actually yes, circle the yes or no, and we'll pop it in the boxes here, and then Susan and I will count the ballots and give you the result. You have a question about that?
Yeah, can you please clarify, Bill Kibbe from Mill Road, can you please clarify what we're voting on?
We're voting on an increase of $12,000 into the budget. And it is a bottom line budget, so we need to be aware of that.
Madam Moderator, you're correct, it's a bottom line budget, but the library budget is a unique animal according to the New Hampshire Municipal Association, and that line item can be amended. And once it's amended, if the budget is, it flows to the bottom line, but if the budget is amended in March, is adopted in March, that line item goes directly to the library trustees and cannot be adjusted by the select board. So this will be an amendment to that specific line item, which is consistent with the New Hampshire Municipal Association.
Brian, is that correct?
It is.
Ryan Cornwell, Finance Director. I tend to agree with what the moderator said, that this is a bottom line budget. However, if the select board decides that they indeed want to increase that particular line item, then we are absolutely obligated to provide that funding over our payment schedule to the library.
Madam Moderator, again, I'll respectfully disagree with Mr. Ryan. According to the New Hampshire Municipal Association Legal Services Department.
Well, how about this? We will put the amendment in as a $12,000 increase to the library, and then we will verify with the state to make sure it works that way.
Thank you.
Kathy, we're going to a vote now, unless you have a question about the procedure.
It's about a procedure. Just questioning, do we have counsel sitting at the meeting like we normally do to help us with these legal questions?
No, we're going to, so we will handle it, but it will be, we do have counsel somewhere?
I don't remember a select board, a meeting like this having an attorney here.
Yeah, I don't think, we don't have counsel here, but we will have it noted that that's what the amendment is, and if the state gives us the okay that we can do it that way, we'll do it that way. Okay? So we're going to go out to the supervisors of the checklist to pick up your little ballot.
Yeah, we make, let's do it now.
Yeah, it is because...
I mean, we're clearly making it.
Yeah, and this is what gets amended. Yeah, good. Yeah. Thank you, Jim.
No, you don't have to. Did you want kickball? You did. Kickball. Yeah. I'll wait for you.
Is anyone left who hasn't voted? Anyone who hasn't voted that needs to vote? I think that's... Jane, is that someone else who's looking to vote? Okay. Motion passes 38 to 15. $12,000 will be added to the budget with the understanding that it's for the library. Okay, any other questions or comments on the budget?
I figured he was.
That we restrict reconsideration of the motion that just passed. Someone needs a second.
Okay, someone want to second that?
No, 15.
You know that person?
38 to 15.
38.
All those in favor of restricting reconsideration on the motion? Anyone against? Motion passes. Okay, any other questions or comments on the budget? It was 38 to 15. Nancy, is that what you just asked me? Okay, with no other questions or comments in relation to the budget, we will move on to Article 6. Oh, do we have a motion to restrict reconsideration on Article 5?
I thought we just did that. We just did.
That was only on the amendment itself.
Oh, move to restrict further consideration of Article 5.
Second.
All those in favor of restricting reconsideration on the operating budget as a whole? Anyone against? Motion passes. Article 5 is restricted from reconsideration. Okay, we're moving on to Article 6, the proposed fire department collective bargaining agreement.
Madam Moderator, I move the article as presented.
Second the motion.
Thank you. Mike, would you like to speak to this article too?
I would, Madam Moderator, thank you. I'd like to start out by thanking the members of Local 3211 as well as the Select Board. This contract that we're voting on next month, but going over today, was a collaboration of 4 months of sitting down at the table and exchanging ideas, looking at different aspects of language, looking at different aspects of health insurance within the contract, and both sides did their best to come out with the best deal for the employees and the taxpayers. The deal that we TA'd is a 3-year deal, 2022, 23, and 24, at 2.5% pay raise each year. Also, in addition to that, the health insurance, which currently is 85% by the town, 15% by the employee, stayed the same for year 1. For year 2, it goes to 83-17%, and for year 3, goes to 82-18%. And the reason for that is that you saw the increases in health insurance during the budget presentation, and the Select Board felt that trying to curtail some of those costs was in the best interests of saving some money going forward. In addition, there was some health insurance buyout language that was added to the contract, which really puts it in both the town's and the union's benefit for employees to buy out, so that the more employees to buy out, the more money that the town saves, and the more that the employees get in order to buy out. So that was an article that we were able to put into the contract that we believe will benefit both groups. Ultimately, we're looking at a $24,000 increase the first year, a $3,000 increase the second year, and a $4,380 increase the third year in the contract.
Any questions or comments on the collective bargaining agreement?
Like to move.
Anything on Zoom or anything? No?
Like to move to restrict further consideration.
Second.
All those in favor? Anyone opposed? Motion passes. We are restricting reconsideration on Article 6, and we're moving on to Article 7. Lease purchase of the Department of Public Works medium-duty truck.
Madam Moderator, I'll move Article 7 as presented.
Second the motion.
Thank you. And James, you're going to speak to this article?
Yes, this is the lease purchase of a medium-duty truck for the Highway Department. This replaces one of their aging, I believe, 2011 trucks that is a main duty truck for the Highway Department and is used throughout the year for many of their efforts. It is up to the amount of $90,000, although I believe the total cost of the truck will come in less than that. This article would raise through taxation the first year's payment of $18,000, and after that, those $18,000 payments would become part of the default budget to pay the balance of the truck. This, and let me just note, this has been identified in the capital improvement plan for the town and endorsed by the CIP committee.
Any questions or comments?
Madam Moderator?
Go ahead, Frank.
Frank Ferraro, 55 Post Road. First, let me say I support the purchase of this truck. However, as we know, leasing a vehicle will require paying interest on the lease for the next 5 years. So first of all, $90,000 total payout for this article is way too much, even for this lease. Director Hubbard told the Budget Committee that the purchase price of the truck, equipped the way that he wants us, would be $55,000. So in any event, there needs to be an adjustment of that top line number. So whatever the interest payment is, we still will be paying interest on this lease for the next 5 years, and this could amount to an extra $5,000 to $10,000 over that time. We have the money in the unassigned fund balance to buy this truck outright. This is money that was collected from taxpayers but was unspent. The Select Board policy is to maintain a minimum of 5% of the subsequent year's spending in the fund balance. As of December of 2020, the fund was a little over 7%. Reducing the fund balance by $55,000 purchase of the truck would bring that fund balance to 6.9. So from 7.1 to 6.9 is the only impact on the fund balance. This is still well above the 5% minimum. Rather than pay a significant amount of interest, we should buy this truck using the unassigned fund balance. So I move the amendment to amend Article 7 to read, Article 7, purchase of the DPW medium truck. To see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $55,000 for the purpose of purchasing and equipping a medium truck for the Department of Public Works, with said funds to come from the unassigned fund balance. This item has been identified and approved, and I have this in writing, Madam Moderator. This item has been identified and approved in the capital improvements plan. Approval of this article will have no effect on the tax rate. Majority vote required.
One, Frank, can I have that? Is there a second on this motion? I got the second as Kathy. Thanks, Frank. Comments, questions on the motion on the floor? Go ahead, James.
Thank you. I am going to oppose this motion for a couple of reasons. The first being the amount of $55,000 is only adequate if we trade in the existing Ford F-350, which has a trade-in value of estimated $18,000. If we look to reuse that vehicle for another department, then the cost of the truck would exceed the $55,000 proposed in the amendment, and we wouldn't have enough funds. That difference would have to be made up elsewhere. In addition, I oppose taking this money out of the fund balance, whereas normally I would not be opposed to taking money, excess funds out of the fund balance in order to pay for an item like this. The fund balance has been hit repeatedly, year after year, for the last few years, to the tune of something like $1 million. Our target for that fund is 8%. The recommended range is 5 to 12. We're at 7 now and going down. That is not responsible fiscal management. That fund has a target. We should seek to meet that target and maintain the fund at that target, not seek to hit it every time there is going to be a cost that we think that we might have to pay a little bit more for. So, while normally I would say, yes, well, let's avoid finance charges by hitting that fund balance, we've hit that repeatedly year after year, and we're now well below our target. So that's why the board chose to put forward this article through taxation so that we can rebuild that fund balance to our target. You'll see that we avoided hitting that fund balance on any of these warrant articles for precisely that reason. So because that $55,000 would be inadequate if we reuse the existing truck for another purpose, and because the fund balance is well below its target amount now, I am opposed to this amendment.
Any other comments or questions on the amendment?
May I?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Echoing Mr. Sununu's sage advice, the last big use of the fund balance was to build the library. So I think it's a little bit strange that he wants to hit it again. The fund balance is what gives the town credit. When you go to the bond bank, if you have money in the bank, they're willing to talk to you. But the full faith and credit of our town backs also the school and any dollar the town is liable for. If you keep hitting that, it's never going to go up. So I am sorry, Mr. Ferraro, but I cannot agree with you. The cost of what you're talking about, the finance charges, is being avoided because, is being accepted because we avoided it on the school. I mean, on the library. You can't have it all your way. We're going to have to start saving again. That's just life. Everybody saves money. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Laurel Poole, 100 North Road. I just have 2 questions.
Sure.
How many trucks do we have in our fleet that we're using right now, and for what purpose? And if this was in the capital improvements plan, was it in there for the 90,000 or the 55?
Is there someone that can answer that?
Director Hubbard would be the best person to answer that question.
Okay, question number 1 is how many vehicles do we have in the DPW? Right now, we have 6 vehicles that we use in the DPW. All of them are used all year round, depending on what season it is, snow.
I know it sounds weird, but I'm going to ask you to speak into the microphone.
Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so we have 6 vehicles. And what was the second question?
The second question was it in the capital improvements plan for the entire amount?
Yes, it was 6 years ago, or it's been in the plan all along at a rate of $90,000 because we didn't know if we were going to go with a dump body on this truck, maybe upgrade it a little bit so we could use it a little more efficiently in the wintertime. So basically, we're just going to replace the truck we have now with a little heavier truck. And it was in the capital improvement plan for 90. Yep.
Thanks. Frank, or someone else? Go ahead, Rick.
Yes, Rick Stanton. I've been on the Capital Improvements Committee as well as the Budget Committee.
Rick, we can't hear you. You're going to need to speak into the microphone.
Okay. I can hear myself reverberate, but this price includes both a plow and a sander. And $90,000 would be the maximum if we can obtain it at a lower price. I'm sure Director Hubbard has been told that that's the way he would go. Furthermore, I think that the Capital Improvements Committee does not recommend how it be obtained. It just recommends it as a priority. The Budget Committee, I don't think should be in charge of how an article or something gets purchased. We can recommend maybe to the Select Board, but it is their decision as the prudential managers of the town on how to finance this vehicle. And to try to change it from below, it should have been, I think the process should have been a request of the Select Board to reconsider, but it is ultimately their decision as our prudent representatives to spend our tax dollars on what the best way to go. Another good point of leasing is that it keeps the variations in the budget and the amount of warrant articles at a more manageable and level flow. And in today's economy with low interest rates, that's a good thing for us because it keeps the tax rate from being more volatile. So I tend to agree with the warrant article as it is posted, which is a lease purchase. Thank you.
Frank?
Thank you. Frank Ferraro again, and I'm speaking as an individual, not as a Budget Committee member, but let me say a couple of things. When this was presented to the Budget Committee, Mr. Hubbard was there, and it was presented as a replacement for an existing vehicle, not as an addition. And we were told that the existing truck this was replacing, the trade-in value would be used to offset the cost of some of the equipment. So with respect to Mr. Sununu, the Budget Committee was told it's a replacement, not an addition. So if the Select Board wants to keep an existing truck, that's not what the Budget Committee was told. Secondly, with respect to Mr. Miller's discussion of the fund balance, first let me say Mr. Miller likes to keep going back after the library article where we did take $545,000 of the fund balance to help pay that. And at that same meeting afterwards, there was a budget warrant article to add $100,000 to the building maintenance fund to come from the unassigned fund balance. I rose to ask that that not come from the unassigned fund balance, that we not add the money, and there was pushback, and I polled the individual Select Board members. Now, Mr. Sununu wasn't on the board at that time, but Mr. Miller and Mr. Majori, my question was, are you comfortable with being closer to 5% than 8%? Because this $100,000 would drive you there. And both of them said they would be comfortable being closer to 5% than 8%. Well, with my proposal, we're at 6.9%. We're closer to 8% than 5%. So unless they want to change their minds of how they felt, we have the money in the unassigned fund balance. It's not taking a hit on our credit. We haven't even accounted for the money in this fiscal year that will go unspent and go into the fund balance. All I'm trying to do is save the taxpayers' money. This is taxpayers' money that has been collected, not spent, and we have a chance to avoid another $5,000 to $10,000 in interest charges. And to the point of the $90,000 and the $18,000, while I'm sure Mr. Hubbard's going to get the best deal he can for us, if this passes, every year the town will collect $18,000 because that goes to the tax rate. So if we get this truck for $60,000, including the interest payments, we're going to collect an extra $6,000 a year we don't have to, because you're going to collect $18,000 in tax money. So I'm moving that we go ahead with purchasing this, use the unassigned fund balance, and not pay interest for 5 years.
Laurel, you had a question or comment?
Yes, I have a clarifying question for Mr. Hubbard. You said there were 6 vehicles. I want to know if they're all light-duty trucks or medium-duty trucks. Medium-duty truck. How many trucks, basically?
6.
We have 2 heavy-duty trucks, 2 medium-duty trucks, and 2 heavy-duty light trucks.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Moderator. I just want to say, any references to comments that might have been made last year have no bearing on what's happening in this meeting. I have no recollection of the conversation about whether or not I was comfortable going down to 5% last year. Also has no bearing on the motion for this warrant article. I will state clearly for the record at this meeting, I am uncomfortable going down in the fund balance closer to the 5 and would rather be closer to the 8, and therefore I object to this motion. I oppose this motion. So just want to make that clear. Thank you.
Any other comments before we go to a vote? Come on up.
Melanie Majori, 17A Hobbs Road. Madam Moderator, I just have a question in regards to, do we document what we take the unassigned fund balance, like the items that we're withdrawing from that fund balance? Because I think you're setting a precedent, right? You're taking withdrawals from a bucket of money, and you need to make sure that there's clearly oversight in regards to how you're taking those monies out. And so I guess I would just ask, is there some history that we can look at to make sure that we unassign? Because this, to me, would set a precedent that all other departments would then want to do the same thing. And then that puts you in a really difficult position of taking money out of that unassigned fund balance. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, are you comfortable?
Could I just
answering
respond
that,
to Mr. Cornwall does an excellent job tracking all of those, where the appropriations come from for all the warrant articles. Excuse me. And we'd be happy to, well, I'll say I don't want to speak for the select board members, to certainly review that at a future meeting so people are aware where those withdrawals have come, where and when those withdrawals from the fund balance have come.
Okay, any other questions or comments before we go to vote? I'm going to ask that when you hold your hand up to vote, that you use your card and you keep your hand up until I can totally count, and then I'll let you know when we can go to the next. So all those, I'm going to just read the amended article again so everyone knows what they're voting on. To see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $55,000 for the purpose of purchasing and equipping a medium-duty truck for the Department of Public Works, with said funds to come from the unassigned fund balance. This item has been identified in the approved capital improvements plan. Approval of this article will have no effect on the tax rate. So all of those in favor?
It's going to pass.
That's a good point. Yeah. Oh, no, she's not yet.
Okay, all those opposed? Oh, you've got to be kidding me. Tie.
And the motion fails.
May I ask a question?
What?
Fails.
May I ask
Yeah,
a
go ahead,
question
Larry.
of the highway director?
We already started the vote, Larry.
I thought you
Yeah.
said it was a tie.
Yeah, we're tied. So 15-15, the motion would be a failure.
Move to restrict further consideration.
Wait,
Second.
go ahead, Frank. What?
Did we have a decision there?
Yes, it's 15-15, so it's a tie, so it's a failure.
Yeah, motion fails. Okay, so it's clear that people want to lease this truck. As I said in my concluding remarks, that's fine. However, regardless of what the truck is purchased for, excuse me, the price the truck is purchased for, the town will collect $18,000 a year in tax money. I think it's only prudent to adjust this number down to what the realistic expectation is for purchasing this truck. Again, this was a replacement truck, not an additional truck. So I've made an estimate on the dollar values here, and I'd be happy if Mr. Hubbard or Mr. Cornwell has an updated number. But I would move to change the amount from $90,000 to $60,000 and to change the annual amount from $18,000 to $12,000. I make that motion.
Is there a second on that? Kirsten? Comments?
I would just ask the basis for the numbers.
Frank?
As I said, I'd be happy to adjust it to any more realistic number. The basis for the $60,000 is the purchase of a fully equipped truck as replacement, as Mr. Hubbard told the Budget Committee, where the existing vehicle would be traded in and that cost to offset the equipment. So that's $55,000 plus $5,000 in interest cost over the 5 years, and dividing 60 by 5, you get $12,000. The same as dividing 90 by 5, you get $18,000.
James?
I'm going to oppose this motion as well, because it's not clear to me that because the way the motion is written, it requires us to put $18,000 a year in the budget. What this says is it raises through taxation $18,000 for the first year's payment on said lease. Future lease payments, because that's a contractual obligation, will go into the budget. But those lease payments will go into the budget, not arbitrary $18,000. The amount of those lease payments will go into the operating budget. So we will be paying for the truck that we purchase. We won't be raising more money than we need to make those payments. The lease payments, because it's a contractual obligation, go into the budget. So the $90,000, as was stated before, was an upper ceiling designed to give the flexibility to equip cover all the options for a truck that DPW may require. Director Hubbard has been extremely responsible over the years in purchasing and equipping his trucks responsibly. I trust him to make the decision to get the best truck we can for the money that we can. So I, again, oppose this amendment.
Kathy?
Kathleen Kilgore, 220 Atlantic Avenue. Ms. Moderator, clarification, maybe it needs to come from Mr. Sununu. I understand that the lease payments go into the next operating budgets until the lease is complete. Is that replacing any leases that are there, or is this, I think what we're trying to get to is you're not, there's concern that we're not turning in a truck, we're now adding another truck, which adds insurance, adds everything. That's kind of what I need some clarification on.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, James.
I think those are two separate issues. The determination about, and I know that Director Hubbard wanted to comment, so I'll certainly be brief. That the determination about turning in the truck for a trade-in hasn't been conclusively determined. I believe the idea was that we may turn that in for a trade-in, but if another department had a truck that was at the end of its life, it could be used for that department to replace. We do that across these departments all the time. Fire department takes trucks from DPW, or code enforcement takes a vehicle from the police. So we manage the total fleet for the whole town. This isn't adding another vehicle to the fleet. If we kept this vehicle, it would be to make use a need that already exists with the town, not to add to the fleet for the town. But if they would determine, if Director Hubbard and the town administrator and the select board determine that trade-in is the best option, we'll certainly do that. By the lease payments is a separate issue. This doesn't replace the lease. This is the truck that we have now is already paid for. This would go in as a first year $18,000, and in subsequent years would go in for the actual lease payments that the town has to make under the contract it signs to purchase the vehicle.
Laurel, were you waiting for?
So I think the way this article is worded currently, and even with the amendment, there might be something missing from it. It seems the purpose of this one in front of us, prior to any amendment, is to keep, in addition, we need to say we're going to keep, we're not replacing it. That's what the $90,000 is for. So unless we trade it in, this one is misleading. So I know we're only going to entertain one motion at a time. So,
right.
But the other question is, do we need 7 vehicles for 7 different purposes? So I guess it's a question for Hub.
Mr. Hubbard, would you like to answer that?
Yes, so the determination on whether to keep the vehicle and use it it's not going to be used at the DPW. It would be used in another department like we have done in the past. The forestry vehicle that's with the fire department now was a DPW dump truck that was retrofitted, saved a lot of money to replace that forestry truck in the fire department. This truck would not be added to our fleet. We would still have 6 trucks. The determination is always kept with the select board. They determine if they want to reuse the truck at the recommendation of myself or other department heads or other departments, such as the cemetery department. So to say we're going to add a truck, we're not. It's up to, we leave it up to the discretion of the board to make a decision. If the trade-in value is high and they want to trade it in, then they would make that decision. The amount of money, Mr. Selectman Sununu is correct. The $18,000 would cut into the payment, the first year's payment, and then the next 4 years would be significantly reduced. It would not be 18 for each of the following 4 years in the budget. It would be the actual number. And this has been done in the past, and over time, we have paid these leases and canceled them out, and they come out of the budget. But there's always a number in there to pick up the next lease. So the budget stays somewhat consistent. It doesn't rise up and down, nor is there a large number that needs to be paid out through taxation in one lump sum in 1 year.
I can just tell by the look on Laurel's face, even though I can only see the tippy tops of her eyes. So I'm just going to ask one of you guys. I think what she's getting at is the truck that he's replacing, the old truck, is that going to replace some other truck down the line in some other department, or is it just an add-on to some other department?
That, as Director Hubbard just said, that determination hasn't been made yet.
Okay, you haven't determined that yet.
We'd want to see what the trade-in value was. We'd want to talk to the other department heads about their needs and look at the other vehicles that are in the fleet. I mean, we're not even going to have this truck in hand for months and months, even if it's approved in March. So at that time, we'll determine what that best use is, whether it's best for the town to use it as a trade-in, or if it needs to replace some other vehicle that might be at the end of its life in another department.
Laurel, did that help you with that final part there where you said of replacing another department? A little. Okay. Frank, go ahead.
All right. And I fully agree with Mr. Sununu, Mr. Hubbard, that the select board has the decision to how to move around vehicles. I will say, however, that the budget committee, at the budget committee, I specifically asked for what the purchase price was going to be for this vehicle, and I was told it would be $55,000, and if to equip it the way they wanted, they would use the trade-in value of the existing truck. So that was the representation to the Budget Committee upon which the Budget Committee made their decision. I don't know what the Budget Committee would have done if they were told, well, that we may not trade it in, but I can't speculate on that, neither can any of the members. And I also accept what Mr. Sununu is saying about subsequent years' annual payment, that the first year would be 18 and the subsequent would be whatever it is. Based on my estimation, the lease payments will be about $12,000. So the difference in the first year is $6,000. And I find it interesting that we had a great debate about $12,000 for a brand-new multi-million-dollar library, but we're willing to just throw away $6,000 in the first year lease just because. So $12,000 for a $3+ million project, it requires a lot of debate and discussion, but $6,000 on a less than $100,000 truck is, that's okay. So that's all I have to say now.
Laurel, you had another comment?
Yeah, so with regard to what Mr. Sununu said, he clarified the point, and I'd just like to restate what I heard him say, is the Select Board wants to have, basically use another vehicle for another purpose, but they have no clue what they're going to use that for. So it doesn't seem to me prudent fiscal management when you're just hanging on to vehicles that you don't know what you're going to use them for.
Madam Moderator.
Go ahead, James.
I'd like to respond to both the last two comments. We're not throwing away $6,000 if we pay $18,000 in the first year. It goes towards the value of the truck that the town has identified as a need. It's not being thrown away. It's just a matter of timing as to when it gets paid. So I object to that characterization of throwing away money. Second of all, we don't not have a clue, as stated before, when the time comes that we come forward, that Director Hubbard comes forward with the purchase of the vehicle. We'll look at the fleet of vehicles that we have in other departments and see if any of them need to be replaced. If they don't, we will trade in the vehicle. If they do, we'll assess whether this vehicle makes a good replacement for an outdated vehicle in another department. We are not adding a vehicle, and we are not without a clue.
Okay, any other comments or questions before we go to vote?
I call a vote.
Let's go to vote right now. So let me just read to you what we have on the floor right now. So to see if the town will vote to authorize the Select Board to enter into a 5-year lease purchase agreement in the amount of $60,000, purpose of leasing and equipping a medium-duty truck for the Department of Public Works, and to raise and appropriate through taxation the sum of $12,000 for the first year's payment on said lease. This lease agreement contains a fiscal funding clause. This item has been identified in the approved capital improvements plan. Again, I ask that you hold your cards up and hold it there till I tell you that we're going to the no vote. So those in favor of the amendment, raise your hands. Those opposed to the amendment? Motion fails, 20-9. Okay. Any other comments or questions?
Move to restrict further consideration of Article 7.
Seconded.
Second. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion passes. We restrict reconsideration on Article 7, and we are moving on to Article 8, purchase of an automated fingerprint scanner.
Madam Moderator, I move Article 8 as presented.
Second the motion.
And James, you're going to speak to this?
This article is for the purchase of a fingerprint scanner for the use in the police department. I don't know if the chief wanted to speak about this, but I'll be brief. Right now, the police department still fingerprints in the old classic TV way of using ink and paper, and it's time-consuming and messy and relies on close contact, especially in these times. The automated fingerprint scanner will allow for that to be a much more efficient process. And as it says here, as it says in the article, eliminate labor-intensive work, prevent mix-ups, allow touchless printing. This item is identified in the capital improvement plan. This also has benefits beyond the work that the police department does, as for parents who know that if you're going to volunteer in the school or for the rec department these days, a background check is required by the state, which requires you to be fingerprinted. Right now, you have to travel to Dover DMV or some other location in order to have that done. So folks in town who wanted to volunteer at places like that could have that fingerprinting done locally, so it's a benefit all around.
Chief Moe, do you have anything you want to add to that? Nope, okay. Any comments or questions on the fingerprint scanner? Kathy?
Kathy Kilgore, 220 Atlantic. Chief Moen, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I would really appreciate if you could come up and speak to the public about the scanner. And is this the best choice for your department? Does it meet what you need? And can you move it forward if you get a new facility in the next few years?
Thank you. Good morning. So this is a advanced piece of equipment that we would be very happy to have at the department. It's not the most technologically advanced in the country. Our current conditions would not support the technology and the conditions required for the best. But this would be a advancement and also could definitely be moved to a new building and would serve our purposes for many years to come.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions on this?
Move to restrict further consideration of Article
Second.
8.
All those in favor? Any opposed? Okay, we restrict reconsideration on Article 8, and we are moving to Article 9, road resurfacing.
Sorry, Madam Moderator, I move Article 9 as presented.
Second the motion.
And James, you going to speak to this one too?
This is an annual article that everyone's probably familiar with for resurfacing the roads. For this year, it's $240,000. $30,000 of that would come from the Municipal Transportation Improvement Capital Reserve Fund, and through taxation, $210,000. For those who are wondering why it's split like that, by having a portion of this at the amount we have in the raised through taxation, it makes us eligible for maximizing our matching grants from the state for road resurfacing. So structuring it this way allows us to get more bang for the buck. And as identified in here, it's three miles of road. For those who are interested, I believe somewhere on the town website there's a general plan of projected road resurfacing that goes on.
I did have a question that was emailed to me from Patricia Myers asking if we did know what roads this was covering. Mr. Hubbard, is that something you can answer easily? I can totally relate to that one.
Okay, so the proposed roads for this upcoming year are Lovering Road, which would be the resurfacing of the entire road. We did some work 4 or 5 years ago, reclaimed a section of it and shimmed it. So this would be completing the drainage along the side of the road and then overlaying the road. Deer Run and Red Fox roads would be addressed. Buckskin would have a small section of it reclaimed and then overlaid. And Grandview Terrace, we would like to try to get to that also this year.
Great, thank you. Any other comments or questions on road resurfacing?
Hi, Bill Kibbe. Hey, Jim, you raised a comment regarding this would make us, it would allow for some mutual assistance or grants. Are those assured? Do we have any confidence we'll get those?
Always.
Or is this speculative?
I believe Ryan might be able to speak to that. We receive a grant, I believe, every year from the state for roads. So it's a regular item that the state has in its budget. And by structuring the article this way, it maximizes the amount we'd be eligible for under that annual program from the state. Ryan's nodding, so I think I got it right.
Okay, so I would just ask that this article be clarified so we understand that it's the reason why we did it this way as opposed to putting in the budget is that it allows for additional grant matching from the state level.
The article has to be written a certain way to satisfy DRA, and so we write the articles in a way to satisfy DRA's language requirements for warrant articles. No.
Any other comments or questions on road resurfacing?
Move to restrict further consideration of Article 9.
Second.
All those in favor of restricting reconsideration? Anyone opposed? Okay, we will restrict reconsideration on Article 9, and we will move on to Article 10, paving at recycling center.
I'll move Article 10 as presented.
Second the motion.
James?
This article is another identified capital improvements plan item. It would repave the surface around the material storage area at the recycling center. Those of you who have been there know that pavement is quite deteriorated, and Director Hubbard identified this as a project that we should do to ensure safety and maintenance of that facility going forward.
Any comments or questions on this article? Kathy?
Kathleen Kilgore, 220 Atlantic Avenue. Just clarification is, are you just replacing the existing driveway there? Or are you adding pavement to areas that are not already paved?
This article addresses both, so the deteriorated part of the paved area that would be replaced, and also areas in front of the bunkers and up around the side of the bunkers would be paved for access with the fork truck.
You can go ahead, Kathy. I don't see anybody else.
Will the repaving and the new pavement be structured and designed to take in consideration stormwater runoff? That is in a residential area of town. I just wouldn't want to see any additional water issues created in the center of a neighborhood.
Yes, all the stormwater is addressed in this, and it's not going to change. It's actually captured on site.
Okay. Any other comments or questions on this?
Move to restrict further consideration of Article 9.
Second.
All those in-
Article 10.
Thanks. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? Okay, we restrict reconsideration on Article 10, and we move on to Article 11, contribution to the Earned Time Settlement Capital Reserve Fund.
Madam Moderator, I'll move Article 11 as presented.
Second the motion.
James, I think you're going to speak to this one, too.
This is a warrant article we've seen before. The Earned Time Settlement Capital Reserve Fund is to buy back employee earned time during their career, or when employees separate. There are liabilities that accrue for unused sick or leave time. That liability is estimated to be $319,000. And you can see here, $87,000 is anticipated to be payable prior to July 1st, 2022. This is to keep that fund at a reasonable level in line with the size of the liability in the near term and the long term.
Okay, any questions or comments on this article?
I'll move to restrict further consideration of Article 11.
Second?
All those in favor? Anyone opposed? Okay, we restrict reconsideration on Article 11, move on to Article 12, contribution to the Coakley Landfill Capital Reserve Fund.
I'll move Article 12 as presented.
Second.
The Coakley Landfill Capital Reserve Fund is what the town uses to pay for its proportion of the liability that is resulted from the Superfund cleanup program at the Coakley Landfill. Northampton and a number of other communities and organizations are responsible for that cleanup as it moves forward. These costs are increasing rather than decreasing over time as more stringent mitigation requirements are imposed. So we are looking to add to this fund to continue to pay those liabilities that the town has.
Any comments or questions on this article?
Madam Moderator, I can add to that also. We
Go ahead,
generally
Mike.
pay out about just over $50,000 a year for fees to Coakley, but in 2031, there's a $250,000 payment that's owed. So this year is the $50,000 plus the $25,000 we will take up every year, and that way we'll have that money sitting there in 2031, so we don't have a spike.
Thank you, Mike. Okay.
Move to restrict further consideration of Article 12.
Second?
All those in favor? Anyone opposed? Okay, we restrict reconsideration on Article 12, and we move on to Article 13, establish Town Land Environmental Remediation Capital Reserve Fund.
I'll move Article 13 as presented.
Second.
James?
This would actually establish a new fund for the town, Capital Reserve Fund, specifically to address environmental remediation issues. Probably, it's fair to say the instigating factor of this was a requirement from DES, Department of Environmental Services at the state, for us to investigate PFAS, potential PFAS contamination in and around the town complex. There was an evaluation that was done recently where it was determined there was some contamination, and they required us to enlist a firm to do a further investigation, identify the scope of PFAS contamination and any water sources that within a certain radius of the town complex that might be contaminated. So this would establish a fund to address those issues, and we would anticipate that there may be further requirements like this coming from DES or EPA that the town needs to address over time. So thought it was prudent to establish a fund where we can start to anticipate some of these costs and set aside funds to address them as they come, because some of these investigations can be quite costly. So we want to be prepared to pay for those requirements when they come down from DES or EPA.
Okay, comments or questions on this? Either one of you?
Kathleen Kilgore, 220 Atlantic Avenue. I have to thank you for addressing this. I think this is going to be an issue going forward. Clarification, it's not just for any PFAS contamination, it's for any type of contamination, correct?
It's environmental.
Well, the current directive from DES, I don't have it. Is it, Mike, could you address, I don't recall if it's specifically limited to PFAS, PFOA, or if it's for a broader.
Yes, the investigation that's currently going on is for perfluorinated compounds, but the warrant article that's proposed will be allowed for any chemical on town property to be cleaned up.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't just be proposed to PFAS for this warrant
The fund
article.
would be to address any future environmentally related requirements imposed on the town. The current one that sort of prompted us to look at establishing this fund was a directive to investigate PFAS, PFOA. But the fund itself, the reserve fund, would be to address any environmental issues that require us to expend funds.
Very good. Thank you for that clarification. I do believe you guys are taking the right steps. As the Board of Trustees moved forward with their project of the new library, we stumbled into contamination on the homestead property that had been there for years. There were 2 septic systems after the demolish of the building that was there that were never, ever drained or removed. And then we've ran into lead contamination, and we have expended, not planned for it in our budget, at least $120,000 to rectify that. So I do believe you guys are acknowledging there could be potential issues going forward. You're taking the necessary first steps to address that. It can be very costly, and you have to do it correctly. Thank you.
Tom Lambert, Exeter Road. I was just wondering how you arrived at this figure.
This initial figure was based on the estimated cost of the study that was imposed on us recently by DES. So as a starting point, we thought that that would be an appropriate amount to initiate the fund.
So will that be establishing a fund, or will that be paying the cost for the current study?
It will be establishing the fund. I believe we paid for the current study out of the current, moving funds around the current budget. But again, looking at the cost of this study, thinking, well, we may have another study similar to this imposed. It was here's an estimated amount we can use to establish the fund for when another requirement may come down to us. So this fund will hold this 34.5 in, until we get another study imposed on us by. That would be the general plan. I think that Jim is nodding here, so the general thinking was to establish it at the amount of what a study like this might cost, even though we moved around funds to pay for the initial study, because we couldn't wait to act on DES's directive for us to undertake this current study.
Thank you.
Okay, any other further questions or comments on this article?
Move to restrict further consideration of Article 13.
Second.
All those in favor? Anyone opposed? Okay. Article 13 is restricted from reconsideration. Now we are going to move back to Article 2 so that we can do Article 2, 3, and 4, the zoning articles. Article 2, zoning ordinance. Do you guys still mind moving it to the floor, and then I'll pass over to Tim?
Larry, do you want to move it?
I couldn't hear.
One of you just move it to the floor so you can speak to it.
Madam Moderator, I would move Article 2 to the official ballot as presented.
Second.
Okay, and just to remind everyone, the next zoning articles that Tim is going to address cannot be amended. They've already gone to public hearing, and they will be going on the ballot as written. But Tim is here to explain what those articles mean, and then you can ask questions and comment on them. Tim, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you, Bobby. Can everybody hear me okay?
Perfectly.
Okay. So basically, Article 2 was not really a significant change to the zoning ordinance. It was merely a clarification that pretty much came out of a request from the town administrator from zoning and planning and the support that Rick has. So basically, Article 2 is relative to accessory structures, and there was already a limit as to what the size and the setbacks requirements were for accessory structures in Section 301. But there was still some confusion when people read specifically the table in Section 203.1 that addresses size and setbacks. So we simply but repeated the same size and setback requirements that were already in Section 301 of the ordinance to a paragraph photograph underneath that table, so it was clarified in both places. The other change that was of some significance was that the ordinance as written today basically says accessory structures have to be behind, they can't be set closer to the street than the principal structure on that property. And that's basically addressing smaller lots and smaller pieces of property where the principal structure may be fairly close to the road. And we do have a number of properties in Northampton that are significantly larger, 10, 15, 20 or more acres. So basically, we added a caveat to the accessory structure and setback from the street, which was basically, it does have to be behind the principal structure unless the accessory structure is more than 150 feet from the road. If the accessory structure is going to be more than 150 feet from the road, it can be closer to the road than the principal structure might be. The other thing it also addresses is that on larger lots, often the principal structure does not face the road, but faces another direction. And then when you start to say the accessory structure has to be behind the principal structure, it gets a little bit confusing because you're not moving it further away from the road. So really, those are the changes for this article.
Any comments or questions about this article? Can you come up to the microphone, sir?
Glenn Martin, Atlantic Avenue. I'm wondering where the 150 feet came from. What's that based on? We have setbacks. We have a lot of non-conforming lots in town, and 150 feet takes an awful lot of someone's land use area. Is there somebody on the board that can answer that?
Yeah, Tim will be able to. Tim, did you hear that question?
Yes, I did hear that question. Quite frankly, it was, I don't want to say arbitrary, but there is no clear and precise right answer. The board was interested in not having accessory structures be out in front of, on smaller lots, be out in front of the house, be right up against the front setback. So for accessory structures, they wanted the distance to be greater than the typical front setback, so it didn't dominate what was going on. And really, this was to address larger lots and you know, that have quite a few acres and where homes, you know, maybe already be hundreds of feet back from the road and that kind of thing. But there's no specific place where this number was recommended or came out of. It was basically a compromise and what the consensus of the board felt made sense.
I guess I'd like further clarification, though. If you have a non-conforming lot, or you, for examples, what if you want to have a farm stand? What if you want to have a bus stop house out front for somebody? These are things that people do around town in rural character, in small towns, and you're saying 150 feet back. Not everybody has 2, 4, 8 acres of land or a 250-foot driveway. I think the 150-foot is, well, a setback that is not welcome or beneficial to many, many housing lots in town.
Well, then what people would have to do is what they currently have to do, the way the ordinance is written today, is that basically, as is noted in item A of this article, if you don't meet the current requirements, which the 150 feet would become one of, you simply come before the planning board and get a conditional use permit, and the planning board reviews what is being requested and what is being asked to do, and if it's reasonable and makes sense, issue a conditional use permit that would allow the examples and other examples, but the examples you just addressed would allow it. So it's just, people would go through the exact same process in the future that they currently have to go through if someone wanted to do that. So the 100, you know, right now, if they wanted to put it in front of the house, they have to come for the conditional use permit. What we're doing now is eliminating the need to come for the conditional use permit for people who have those larger properties. But we're not putting a new requirement on what people have to currently do.
Would a homeowner landowner have to have a full-blown survey, wetlands setbacks?
No.
HIS
No.
mapping or any of the other expense that now would be incurred?
No. If there was something about the property that the planning board felt more information was needed, but that would not be an automatic requirement.
And I'm sorry, Mrs.
That's okay,
Moderator,
go ahead.
if I'm,
I don't
if
think
there's
anyone else
if there's
has a
anybody else that
question
looks
yet.
to looks
Go
to
ahead.
speak, I'll step back.
Anyone else question or comment on this?
I'll move to restrict further consideration of this article.
Okay. We don't really need to, we can't amend it.
We're not talking, we're not amending it, I'm saying I don't want to talk about it anymore.
Oh.
Well, then I'll second that.
There you go. All in favor?
I don't think there are any more comments or questions on this. We're going to move on to Article 3, zoning ordinance.
Madam Moderator, I move Article 3, amendment to zoning ordinance for the Aquifer Protection District to the official ballot as presented.
Second.
Tim, would you like to speak to this one?
Absolutely. Okay. Article 3, there are some definite changes in Article 3 to what the current ordinance says, but I would like to take a moment to preference the explanation of what the changes are by just making a reminder to everyone that all the water that homeowners in Northampton use, regardless of whether you're an Aquarian customer or you have your own private well, they're basically coming from aquifers in the town of Northampton. So your water does come from the town of Northampton. And the town of Northampton is fairly fortunate that we have two types of aquifers in the town. The first one, technical term is stratified drift, but they're basically deposits of sand and gravel that are fairly close to the surface and sometimes come to the surface that are basically contain significant amounts of water. The second type of aquifer are the bedrock aquifers, where the water resides much deeper, basically in the cracks and the fissure of the bedrock that's underneath all our ground. So basically, those are the two main types of aquifers we have. Northampton was an early adopter of an aquifer protection ordinance that has been on our books for quite a period of time. And when Northampton originally set up the aquifer protection ordinance, they set it up to protect the stratified drift aquifers, the sand and gravel ones that are close to the surface. A couple of them in town actually have ponds in them, where the pond is actually part of the stratified drift aquifer, where the land is just a little bit lower and the water actually comes above the surface. But that water in those ponds is basically part of that aquifer that's in the sand and gravel, and the water is withdrawn from that for Aquarian wells. So what was done a number of years ago was that the Aquifer Protection District in Northampton was set up to protect those surface aquifers which were, or close to the surface aquifers, which were very close to the production wells that Aquarian was using to produce the water. So what we're doing now is, over the course of time, as the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services has further investigated and has a better understanding of the behavior of these stratified drift aquifers, and as other towns in the Seacoast area have developed their own aquifer protection ordinances, Northampton has basically fallen behind because we were only protecting the portion of the stratified drift aquifers that were fairly close to the wells, and water was contributed significantly to what was drawn out of those wells. All of the surrounding towns in the Seacoast and the DES recommendation now is to protect the entire stratified drift aquifer. So Part A is simply to move the boundaries of the Aquifer Protection District out to encompass the entire stratified drift aquifer, not just the very high yield portion of it. Basically, what would happen is, if we had some sort of toxic spill or some other contamination in these outer areas that are not currently protected, it would simply take longer for that contamination to eventually migrate to the high production areas in those wells. So we're just trying to get a better protection for the stratified drift aquifers. As I said, this is entirely consistent with what the Department of Environmental Services now recommends, and is entirely consistent with what all the surrounding towns are currently doing. The other part that we have added is Aquarian gets some of their water from stratified drift aquifers, but Aquarian also gets a significant amount of their water from high-yield deep bedrock wells. And the land surrounding those bedrock wells are not currently part of our aquifer protection ordinance. It is highly recommended by the Department of Environmental Services. We also protect the areas around the wells that contribute to the production of water from those wells, and not all of the surrounding towns are protecting those areas, but some of them are, and in particular Hampton is protecting a number of areas around their bedrock wells where that area contributes to the water from the bedrock wells. So what we're doing is we're expanding the Aquifer Protection District to also cover the area that the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services has identified as the portion of land where water, rainwater, that snow melt, whatever, that comes into that land flows into the recharge of those bedrock wells. So what we're doing is we're adding the areas around those bedrock, Aquarian only the Aquarian wells, but we're adding the areas around the Aquarian wells as recommended by the DES that contribute to the water supply of those bedrock wells. The third item that's part of this is that right now, as part of the Aquifer Protection Ordinance, a hydrologic study is automatically required for anyone who is doing any development within the Aquifer Protection District. And we've had a couple cases recently where applications came forward where they raised the question, and it was pretty clear a detailed hydrological study was not required for the particular nuances of that case. So what we're doing is we're making the requirement for the hydrological study a decision that the planning board gets to make as to whether or not it's required. Currently, if an applicant doesn't feel they need to do it, and even if the planning board agrees that they don't need to do it, the applicant will have to go to the zoning board of adjustment and basically get a variance to the town ordinance to avoid having to do it. Now, the planning board can basically simply make the decision that it's not required and the application can move ahead. The fourth requirement of the fourth part of our change is again similar to the last one, but it covers any part of the Aquifer Protection Ordinance. Again, right now, if some portion of the Aquifer Protection Ordinance didn't seem to apply to an application, they would have to go to the Zoning Board of Adjustment for that and basically get a variance to the town ordinance. Again, what we're doing is now allowing the Planning Board to issue a conditional use permit for that need and that use and save the time, the expense, and the delay of having to go to the Zoning Board of Adjustment. I think that summarizes the major changes. If someone looks at the differences, there are some editorial changes, some cleaning up of typos and using different words, but none of that changes the intent of the remaining portion of the ordinance at all. So.
Meeting is to ensure that everyone asks whatever questions necessary to ensure that they can properly vote on these articles on March 9th. Okay, moving on to Article 4, Amendment to Zoning Ordinance.
Okay, what's going on in Article 4
Tim, hold on
is
a
we
second.
know that there's...
Tim, I got to move it first, sorry.
Sorry.
My fault. Madam Moderator, I move Article 4, Amendment to Zoning Ordinance Definitions in Industrial Business Residential District to the official ballot as presented.
Second.
Okay, go ahead, Tim.
Okay, can I go now, Jim?
Sure.
Yes. Article 4 basically addresses the issue of facilities for basically storage units. There is no, in the current town ordinance, there is no direct discussion of storage unit facilities. So the planning board is working on that right now. And basically what Article 4 consists of is in Section 104 of the ordinance, basically the definitions, and Section 202.4, the definition of the industrial business residential district is to define what a storage unit is. So at least we have a definition of it, and it's clear where the different parts of the ordinance and the site plan regulations apply to storage units. We also put it in the list as requiring a special exception. Therefore, any application of a storage unit will have to go to the ZBA. The intent there is because these can be fairly significant developments, it can have ramifications within the town. It will be looked at by both boards, the zoning board of adjustment as well as the planning board, so we make sure it gets thorough scrutiny and, evaluation of what's in the best interest of the town. And then further to that, the planning board is currently working on drafting site plan regulations for storage units. Now, the town site plan regulations, they don't need to come before the legislative body for approval. We hold a public hearing, probably a couple public hearings, but a bare minimum of one on the changes to the regulations, and then they become part of the site plan regulations. So the bottom line summary is we're adding the definition and the requirement of a special exception for these storage facilities, and we're also in the process that hopefully within the next 2 to 3 months, a process for what those storage unit facilities have to do to meet the site plan regulations in the town of Northampton.
Bill?
Hey, Tim, that was very good. I appreciate you elaborating on that. Can you add any clarification as to when those restrictions would be in place if we would do this, and if any of them would be retroactive to a specific date based on your approved or completed construction of a facility?
To the best of my knowledge, we would have to get legal on this. I don't think we can really make it retroactive. Typically with ordinances, stuff becomes grandfathered. And when they're going to come into play, on another one of my screens at the moment, I'm looking at a draft of what the site plans will be for it. Because it's a draft, I don't want to get into elaborate exactly what's in it. But hopefully, I hesitate to say next month, but hopefully within the next 2 to 3 months, we'll begin to get some fruit of those efforts and have something that will go into the site plan regulations.
Yep.
But that's my opinion of the timeline. I can't speak for the entire board.
Madam Moderator? Just to confirm, you would not be able to apply something retroactively to a site plan that's already been approved. It's approved under the laws and regulations as at that time, and the RSAs do have, I believe, a 5-year limit, but as long as some sort of active construction has been started prior to that 5-year expiration date, then the current regulations that it was approved under, it's still allowed under those regulations.
Thank you, Rick. Any other comments or questions? Okay, that takes care of Article 4, that takes care of all the articles. Are there any other comments or questions in general? No? Okay, then I'd just like to remind you all that March 9th is voting. It will be here in this room. We begin at 8 a.m., close at 7 p.m. Again, as soon as we have absentee ballots available, those that wish to vote absentee can come in and apply for an absentee ballot. And this meeting is officially closed. Thank you.
I would just like to add real quick before the Budget Committee actually jets out, we just have a couple things we just need to touch upon, and then we should be good to go. So we can just all get together real quick just to vote on a couple things.
This is public.
still public. True.
Yes, the budget committee is still public.
Right.
So if anybody decides to stay on.
What are we doing? So we're just going to all get together real quick, just to kind of vote on a couple quick things. All right, so I don't know if you guys can hear me down there. So just really quick with the attendance, so we have Brian Good is missing from our meeting. So we're just going to vote on a couple really quick things. The meeting minutes for January the 19th. Does anybody have any modifications or adjustments to the meeting minutes? All right, so I just need a motion. Okay, so we have a move. Do we have a second? We have a second. All in favor of accepting the meeting minutes from the 19th? All right, so it's unanimous. We have one abstention. The next is the modification. So line item 014550-10-910 to increase that line item by $12,000. Do we have any discussion at all? Okay, so we have moved to recommend. We need a second. Okay, so we have a second. So this is in regards to the library. Discussion at all? Yes, Frank? Right, so we're going to basically be voting on the bottom line budget, which increases by $12,000.
Should be only on the bottom line, but yeah.
Does anybody have the number of the bottom line number?
7786158. That's the 12,000 added.
Is that with the adjustment?
12,000.
Okay, so all in favor of the revised bottom line budget by $12,000? And opposed? So we have 2 opposed. And who was for?